Hello, everyone. It's kind of funny how I doubted several times how far we'll get with this personal project of mine. I never knew that I could make much progress with everything in this long-term project. Everything I've done so far in college was a roller coaster. No-brainer. But I definitely went through significant hardships to continue this project going. I would always think about the content I would want to make for this. And it was going to strictly be about the process I've done and have it be for the portfolio. But I saw this become a grander project to simply add elements of me in my time lapse. I think it's super important along with the images, of course, but at the end of the day, I do think that I would have eventually loved to just capture everything that I could have. Throughout these 3 years, I know for sure in your mind you're wondering, where's your freshman year progress? Didn't you enter college in 2022? Okay, well, yes, I have, but let me be clear when I say this. There weren't enough industrial design courses that didn't have any reason to create this video journal entries. After speaking with my academic advisor, she told me I wouldn't be doing much ID-heavy studios that I wanted to do until my sophomore year. And that moment made me feel pretty bummed out. But as it's in the name, it's called Time-Lapse Journal. So I would like to touch up on what I was thinking throughout every project I've ever had and how I was feeling throughout that entire semester project-wise, and some other personal things I would like to touch up on. So, huge disclaimer ahead as you watch this early in the movie. It's gonna be a while. So, rewinding, it's sophomore year, and I was coming out of a terrible relationship from summer, and I felt like I hit an absolute rock bottom when I did. I've had so many instances throughout, like the beginning of August, where I was just really out of it. Also, forgot to mention that I also got fired from my daycare art teaching job. It was in Long Island City. Not that it matters where the location is, but I figured I'd let y'all know. When all of that was happening, I was kind of forced to continue pushing forward. Also, I've forgotten to mention this person I was in a relationship with went to it, and I was super glad that they transferred out of college the semester I got back. So that did help, but there was an empty hole. I was still having a hard time accepting in terms of my self-perception in regards to things like sex and all that jazz that I don't think it's worth discussing in this movie. But I was really feeling like I needed some sort of validation. But then I realized I didn't at all. I just needed to restart with a fresh mind, telling myself I wouldn't be needing to see this person ever again on this damn campus. I wanted to say that I didn't have this huge idea at all until it was a month after the semester started that I needed to just come up with something. But in that month of September, I was happy in the fact that I met a lot of new friends, and I was super happy again because I wanted to make a friend group that I could talk for long hours when we would be able to meet every now and then, and I wanted to give out a special thanks to those friends and friends I'm also no longer friends with. I've made throughout my years in college that I got to be in the person that I want to be, and continuously be spontaneous in every right way possible. Then right by the beginning portion of my 2 ID studio courses, I was super involved with thinking about what I could do to remember these projects I will undergo through these next 3 years. I was pretty scared about the idea. It was a project I wanted to indulge in pretty badly. But if I'd give up halfway, I would certainly not have changed. Because if there's anything that I want to let you guys know, there's something I forgot to touch up on ever again. And then I will not I will never, for the fear of the actual production part, the making, the editing, the post-processing of collecting so many moments. Doubts and fears would rule my decision for giving some crazy ideas like this one such forgiveness and devote all the time and energy to stress about documenting every project I've ever taken. But I decided to take the risk regardless. I thought about all of the moments I would regret not finishing an idea, all those moments before with smaller ideas I had. And I would wondering all of that, what ifs and could haves. So I just ponder about the finished product, but never actually do anything about those thoughts to execute them right then and there. So now I need to execute a plan and stick with it as much as possible. The plan started with storage. By this point in my life, I was a student who didn't have access to a lot of funds for what I wanted to fund personally. So I decided that it was a given necessity without thinking that I need a lot of the storage I could get. So I started off with a 512 gigabyte iCloud storage plan per month. Later on, I did have to get a 2 terabyte family plan. It was that much space that the time lapses were taking, and on top of managing the photos for process across all Apple devices. So I needed to make sure that I got that to start off with. And then here comes with the other part that I had to think about. What devices is low cost but still high enough quality to record my time lapses? My iPad. And I was super glad I had that with me as opposed my iPhone. That would have been a hassle to set up. So now that I'm ready, I would get started with my first ever project to deal with, the spatula project. Looking back at this is insane to think about because I was like pretty skinny back then. I put up about 60 pounds in college. I was that invested to this personal project of mine that I just stressed over them and forgot about my diet and gym life for this. Now, currently working at my apartment with smaller portions of food on top of the treadmill. I am at home and do cardio for an hour at least every day. So I would feel the investment was there for it. It's just definitely cost my weight. So anyways, the spatula project. Man, I couldn't realize that I was super scared of the bandsaws and all of the machinery tools that the ID shop had to include. I was like, nope, I'm gonna stick to my cardboard, hot glue gun, and X-Acto blade, and not deal with anything. If I fuck up, I would lose my fingers. Which is super funny now looking back at that, because later, my spring semester of 2024, sophomore year, I would apply for my ID monitor position that I would then have for the last 2 years of my college. But I was still excited due to the fact that we were gonna make a homemade object you find every day when cooking. So I was still fine with it. Plus, I didn't even really understand how to operate the machines at all, so adding to my arsenal would be pretty smart. So nonetheless, we begin. While filming my time-lapse, I would realize how silly it was to record myself with a big iPad Pro in front of myself. And people realized what I was doing could seem pretentious. Mind you, while having made some great friends, by this point, they are freshmen, so their schedules weren't as busy as it was for me, given I was a sophomore. I started to deal with my actual major courses for once. And then I started to realize that I was getting lonely within my major. Also, no brainer again, but of course, it didn't help that I had a hentai beanie at all. I had at all times, and I could tell while people stares that they thought I was definitely weird or brave to be wearing something like that out in public willingly. But at the same time, I was thinking to myself, I'm not going to change my beanie or my appearance because it would be pretty stupid, all things considered. I eventually tried my best whenever I saw someone in the same class as me, and I would wonder if they thought their project or prototype looked really cool and see if I should start a conversation. But I would be met with short conversations and not really any conversations that would be conductive at all. So I would just let my actions speak for themselves. I would time-lapse and continue, because now this long-term project at this time was filling up another void of feeling like I wouldn't fit with a group of people within my year, and I would constantly talk to, or I guess be able to talk with them to some capacity, and definitely not some stupid ass small talk. So I will just continue. But aside from that, I was figuring how the material of the wood I was messing with. The piece of wood was birch, and I didn't know that after bandsawing the profile out, I would have so much energy to rasp away with my hand power. Fucking lord, dude, it was so much. I was getting so many cuts from the rasp, and I know I should have used the Shinto for faster results, but I felt like it was too wide and would cut off so much material. So I said, fuck it. I would use the rasp because it got finer grooves of small little tooths that could, bite the wood. Did it leave more, work for the god-awful sanding I had to do? Yes. I was, using this as an experience tool to, figure out how many, how my dexterity would improve from using such a light tool. But when doing the same repetitive motion, it would be super tasking. I started with feeling like my shoulders and forearms were light as, feather, to being sore, and heavy as shit. So when it came to the hand of the spatula, it was relatively easy to work with, but super chunky in the beginning. But when this was over and fine-tuned to be ready for sanding, I moved into the neck, if you will, of the spatula, and man, it's super hard because I wanted to mimic organic grooves moving along like a slug left its trails and made a dent from it. Rasping away was super difficult because now I feel the vibration of the material and I'm like, fuck. So I had to be extremely careful moving forward in the sanding process. When I got to the sanding process, it was relatively easy to get to it because it was simple. It was a simple process that wasn't too much to handle due to how easy it was. Just repeat the hand motion with starting 80s grit sandpaper, but as soon as I dealt with the much high grit like 100 and 150, my hand was starting to get tired real fucking fast. I was super tired out just doing this for like 3 hours straight. Super annoying process when I first started, which now doing it is still a dread, but doing it just because of the fact that I know how long of a process it is to get it looking and feeling as smooth as marble. And when having to do that repetitive motion, you just gotta have breaks. No Dremel or machine will get as refined for things as intricate as carved tools that need that fine polishing. Now you're wondering, if I could use a spatula right away, hell the fuck no. You cannot. And if you do, no matter the amount of air blowing the sawdust away, you will have a lot of sawdust marks collected from the air, and it will just touch the spatula, and you will have the sawdust potentially cooked into your food. So after sanding away at the final grit 220, I just blew the spatula as much as possible and grabbed beeswax oil. You're like, what the fuck is beeswax oil? That's a good question. It's basically so that the spatula will be food ready. And voila, it's ready. This project, if anything, has taught me patience alongside the fact that after finishing my first ever time-lapse journal entry, became something I was super proud of myself. That for one, I figured out the right settings for everything in the video, uploaded it in Instagram so I could always look back onto it and showcase it for others to see. Meanwhile, doing another project, there wasn't much time-lapse till it was the month of December. November wasn't really much for my sophomore studio courses. So then I persisted to work on the final project. Mind you, during the Thanksgiving break, I had to work on my Illustrator file. That project was super easy and mundane, so the enjoyment wasn't really rewarding other than knowing some level of performing, well on these platforms, especially the commands. I still know them to this day, which is something I'm pretty proud of myself. There have been times where some of my friends would ask me what was the short command keys for something that they needed after working on a file for like an hour or two, figuring out every other way to do the same effect simply because they don't remember the short command keys for the same outcome. Anywho, Thanksgiving just ended, and I was just out of it, man. I was doing my 2 part-time jobs, the deli job and a class assistant job, so that makes me drained out even more. And so we continue forth. I had done initial sketches for my final project, and I was pretty excited in the fact that they were able to use AI in our initial sketching phase. I remember Scully was having us use this AI generative model as a springboard to bounce interactive ideas to then sketch out a park playscape. Essentially making a miniature model, responding towards a problem, and continuing forward from there. So after we had our first rounds of sketches, we then jumped right into model making. Man, obtaining the necessary materials to forge into this project was a fucking pain to work with. So when I did it, I ended up what I knew best: cardboard and purple foam for capturing forms that are needed to make cool childlike playscapes. And I was just not liking the fact that we had 1 week to present our model and a fucking slide deck of the problem and solution stakeholders we had to address for a critique. And man, I was just not feeling that at all. Neither of my classmates, they also didn't fuck with it at all. So I was like, fuck, I also need to go and grab texture paper that represents grass. So I was like, I need to do a solo trip to Michael's, and I was not having it. Mind you, I didn't know anyone that had a car to drive me over to Michael's. And mind you, I have done this before. Taking a shuttle bus all the way to Walmart and walking to Michael's. This is also like at 5 p.m. So I was like, fuck, man, I just got paid. I might as well go and have a meal for myself. So I went to Red Lobster and wanted to feel nostalgic. Had some food and then went to Michael's, grabbed the textured grass. I grabbed like 2 rolls of them just in case I need to use a bit more later, or somehow I fuck up the first roll of it. After that, I went back, and plus I was like, the entire time I was doing that, I was having the footage roll in my iPad, so that's kind of cool. I'm surprised no one stole my iPad that night, surprisingly, very fortunately. But anyway, I had to do some form of all-nighter to some extent to not fall behind. Because now, I know damn well after the model making is finished, the post-processing part of it will be annoying as shit. So after that, the cardboard has this hill-like feel to it that you just saw. And because of that, I wanted to reimagine the feeling of climbing up a hill and rolling down like all kids at some point have done. The exact precision is something that does, wear out my wrist strength, and I was using the rulers to create at the 2 corners of the cardboard to create that slope. Also to mention that you've also saw that I did stack up a couple of layers of cardboard. Y'all, like, what the hell? Like, why the hell do that? So that it looks like a cut out of the earth. It makes it feel believable. Now, here comes the grueling part that is pretty tasking as well. I had gone with making the sculpture out of purple foam, and as I did it, I've been getting cuts from the fucking rasp tool and making it really not enjoying the process of it. But managed to do it, and then got that shit out of the way. As I remember, I was stress eating in the sense that I was just lacking a lot of sleep the past couple of days due to the late night work sessions. Again, to be ahead, but also to capture as much footage as possible for the time lapse to roll. When I got them done, I had to sand them to perfection. So when I did start to make the next step of sanding each of the sculpture sets, so here's the kicker: I have to start working on the paint. And the paint part is super annoying because I didn't have any of my own. So a friend of mine was kind enough to allow me to have the paint in a tiny brush. And that process was long and strenuous, but I managed, so to finish it in time and, to see all of the days dedicated to finishing this project was super rewarding once again. Time-lapse journal entry 2 was really cool to see because it wasn't an object I was making. I was making a miniature landscape model for people to see. This project was very strenuous, because in fact I dumped at least a solid $35 into this, and it remotely made it as good as, as I can get it to be. But when it was done and settled with, right, I looked back at this and I was done with the semester and got back home and super happy that I did my first semester of time-lapse project that was worthy of capturing, and I couldn't be more happy than anything else I could have accomplished. I proved to myself so much that I was getting the name as a time-lapse journal guy. And I knew that my actions were going to speak louder than my words. And although I was committed, I was still feeling, pretty alone within my major. But if making a statement by doing this is making a dent towards my path to the people for knowing who I am, then so fucking be it. It's working. Hard work is showcasing that from people, and they're talking about it. It was from that and moving into spring semester, I started to know my colleagues such as Agnea, Ethan, Gabe, Nathan, Joe, and many other ID students in my graduating class pool I was becoming acquainted with, to then becoming great friends I would hang with and regularly talk about life outside of class. Anywho, guys, let's move on to spring semester time lapses. So to be concrete with you guys, there isn't much other than the fact that I was doing 2 other ID courses, one being purely CAD all the way, and the other sophomore studio courses was about the same as the previous semester was like, and, problem to make a solution with some sort of physical prototyping. So when I worked on my academic life, I was also falling in love with this girl named Anna, who, we are 2 years strong now, and I couldn't think any more to the amount of tribulations and achievements we've had with each other. This person has never doubted me and continued to support my time-lapse journey, and became my partner in crime in the end of my sophomore spring semester. And I asked her to be my girlfriend while we were doing long distance, Albany and Bronx, right? But let's continue. I was super excited and fearing for CAD, due to how much of an entry barrier it was in the beginning. Having to learn how to think very parametrical, and in Fusion it was forgiving at least, due to the fact that there's a time-lapse bar in the bottom. And I was glad, but man, adopting that mentality was a nightmare the first month or two. I was really despised by the form tool, and due to how I was not digging with the fact that the time-lapse bar just completely disappears on ya, so you're just gonna have to have a legit restart the entire process in the meanwhile of learning to navigate through the different tools with the form tool. And I was super not into it at all. I digress further. While that was happening, I was given a 1-week project to recreate an art movement from an ID history from last semester, and created something that embodies that time period. So, as you all know at this point, I like natural forms and sculptural forms. So, I just chose the Art Nouveau movement and thought, hey, let's use this and borrow lots of natural forms and color schemes. So let's make a joystick controller that you can press down, you can press the button. Holy fuck, it was super tasking, because I was wake up early and go to work for the deli job and also for the class assistant job as well, and I would immediately go work on this project. Using the knowledge I had from the spatula class, I said, let's make, stacks of 3 pieces of wood and put them together, found them in the scrap bin, would glue it, and go from there. And then I carved out the general shape of it from the side, grabbed my wraps tool, and went at it for as long as I could to feel out the handle. Mind you, you're wondering, bro, how the fuck did you know the width of your hand and all? And I continuously went back to my human factor book from the class I was taking this semester. It helped that I had the Henry Dreyfuss book, because it was relatively easy, because I would just ask people to feel it and which hand do they feel most comfortable to hold it and grip it. I was super happy about it, because I would constantly adjust whether or not I need to carve out more on one side over the other. And then that was something that I would enjoy. It's that feedback loop and modifying right then and there. I love prototyping and making mock-ups for. So that ultimately made me think how serious I was about making my minor hand-making drive kind of ordeal, and thus I decided to make it to be about materials and craft studies, which was super helpful. I had so much more purpose than I've ever felt before for time-lapsing, even in different experiences and material explorations. That was something that I was excited about. While this was happening, I was taking another course about human measurements and ergonomics. This was an interesting course because now it was a half and half. The first half was a course that was just a lecture based on 1 hour, and half of hearing about what's making something about measurements of human and men, from child to adult to elderly. The whole class had been assigned to work on a particular part of a body to recreate a living GERT suit. The GERT suit is about, what it means to make someone who's relatively a young adult feel like an old person would feel like. And that was in the span of the later half of the spring semester. I will say this with all due respect, but I really hate the later half of the spring semester. It's too fucking fast. The final half of the fall semester is not as bad. It still feels like I could get everything done in a timely fashion and not mess with the quality, but the spring semester later half is definitely a ball game. All we did was split the workload with everyone, and I was mainly contributed with the preliminary sketches, and then worked with cutting out a general profile of the foot. We used my foot to model, and when I did it, it wasn't that bad. I went to Walmart afterwards to grab weights for my ankle to simulate the feeling of walking pretty slowly. The assembly for the footwear was relatively easy. The hard part was making sure we all had found time to get every aspect of it done, so that, none of us feels like we did more work over the other. So, very simple. But that had happened anyway, unfortunately. On top of all of this happening, me and my friends wanted to room with each other and get this sorted out so we could all, move in at UC. And the place we got was really close to campus, so that wasn't bad at all. When that happened, we all were still doing our things. People were getting busier and making their own discoveries of what they like and all, which is normal for friend groups to do. It's not parting, ways in my eyes. It's people just finding out their smaller niche of things for, certain interest. At this point, me and my friends were struggling to find our time due to everyone needing to move out and all that jazz. So when I had to move out, we decided to group up at some point to discuss how we would roughly control the household responsibilities. I went that way for a bit, but it was pretty difficult. I put it in short. I was supposed to split dishes with me and my roommates, but I wanted to get those responsibilities split. One day the other person, does it, and one day I do it the next. But it didn't follow out like that at all. I ended up doing everything, so that stressed me out a bit. Because for a bit I was hand washing everything for a while till midterms. But after all this, a former friend of mine and I were concerned about how I wasn't hanging out with him, and he read my time being spent with my girlfriend was very similar to my ex. And that wasn't the case. Mind you, he said that while my girlfriend was there with me. So it was kind of a shit show. Because they don't really know each other nor hang out like that, which is fair. But that got everything kind of on the wrong note when moving into my junior fall semester. But let's move on towards my fall semester junior year. So now, it's junior year. My summer wasn't all that bad. I got to go to Canada for a Transformer convention with my friend / roommate, and it was a blast. Plus, I passed my driving test, and I was super elated because now I was able to get to drive in my girlfriend's car and get her to be the passenger princess, which I've always wanted to for a long time. It felt pretty nice doing all of that. I've always, wanted to know what that feeling was like driving upstate, and I was super happy about that. Other than that, I'd finally got to move into my apartment. First time being able to room in a quad with friends, and it was pretty cool. I had definitely learned the phrase, what the phrase meant. The phrase I'm talking about is friendship. Sometimes we just need to stick to being friends and not roommates. It doesn't work all the time. It doesn't work out that way. Because I was learning a new side from everyone, and I was trying to navigate through that. While not really resolving, or I guess apologizing for that conversation from the last bit of spring semester, I was able to read the eyes and actions of my roommate and his girlfriend a bit anytime she would come and visit from Buffalo. Oh yeah, my girlfriend transferred, by the way, from my college to University of Buffalo for, cheaper tuition. So that way she had to visit. So that's why she has to visit due to, of course, her having the car to visit. But anywho, the vibe switch would be noticeable, and I've always was able to read it, and that would act, and they would act normal and chill with me. But when my girlfriend would come over to sleep over the weekend, the vibe would be super off or super forced and not genuine. I've tried to speak up about the unsettling vibes towards the both of them, and they said they would change about it, but they never really did, and just got worse going into spring semester. This is all happening while I'm, juggling my new job, replacing my deli job, while still maintaining my class assistant job. The new job is more centered around my major, which is being an industrial design monitor. This felt super rewarding. It made me feel super connected to my major, and it felt like it confirmed my love for prototyping and engaging others to help their projects. Also juggling another thing, my first semester started my minor courses. My first ever class was a 6-hour course that would be super long and tasking. Due to the fact that I was, really struggling it for the first 8 weeks of class. That class was ceramics throwing vessels, and I was just super done with it at some points, but it was my fault for not getting an apron for protecting my clothes from getting super fucking messy. So I was living with the fact that I would have to clean my clothes every night due to the shortage of pants and clothes I have. It was a fucking struggle recycling my clothes to wash and dry, and that some days I would rewear the same pants per 2 days or so. It was super comforting that everyone else I knew there was industrial design students, and that made me feel like another home before fleeing away from the people from my people in a way. It's interesting because in a couple of time lapses you'll see later, I was surrounded with other people that weren't industrial design students. It was for once, other classmates that were from different majors, which has its plus and negatives in a way, but presuming back to the present time, I was basically having a struggle. I would not recommend in any way possible to launch your major, your minor, with a 6-hour credit course, because believe me, you will need to add additional all-nighters to the rest of the class time, and it will drain you. Trust me. But other than that, I will say that you need to dedicate and allocate certain days that are within reason to make progress within the class. Because I initially threw out 6 hours for meetings once every Friday should be substantial. But it's not at all. So I felt like it would be super easy in a lot of ways, but no, it's definitely not. So I learned the hard way. The struggle that constant practice outside of class became the primary focus, so I didn't feel like I was falling behind in the class alongside, with my other classmates. But nonetheless, I was making sure that my major, my mainline junior ID courses be prohibited from thinking I would have to dedicate every single hour to it. I also, mind you, have to do a graphic tactics class from 5 to 8 at night, so that was mentally tasking. Think of this. I had to manage to fit in my dietary, responses as well. But if I didn't, I knew I wouldn't be performing in a way I should be expecting myself at all. And that will bother me severely. Food and having good control and balance with everything else is what strives me to be a good, full-fledged, human being. Someone who is willing to balance it all in the midst of chaos, struggle from the amount of stress I may endure from one singular class. And I'm looking at you, ceramics. Okay, to be fair, it was a 500 level course. I did have priority due to being an NTID cross-register student, so I was trying my best to take advantage of the fact that my services being a super priority based on my deaf and hard of hearing people. So I wanted to make sure that I was taking privilege of my own given rights within the college. Anywho, back on the timeline, I will say the most hard to capture mindset I had to grasp was when my professor told me that I had to adjust to the amount of less accrued time for socializing, and depending the kind of person you are, that could determine how dedicated you are to the craft you are to making sure you put the best quality of craft. Especially if it's your first time dabbing into ceramics. It's crazy that my struggle for the first 8 weeks of class was dedicated to making sure my throwing form and technique was perfected enough that I could go about, dedicating the overall form for future projects in the class. Crazy to think that the basic tools and infrastructure is super necessary to make anything you have in mind. Obviously, from the demos you have, other things you have to learn, like learning the essential skills, making the lid in the most efficient way possible, or making cups with a fixed handle in mind. The biggest part of it all was that after he would make us learn how to do it, for the final, at least we had to learn how to perfectly, replicate the same form in terms of everything being the same amount of pounds to the same diameter. He wanted us to get better from repeating the same form, and by doing so, we managed to make pretty good replicas of our original ideas. And for me, knowing how hard it's becoming as each of my junior course ID classes and the classes were asking super demanding tasks, it was struggling to manage both at the same time. And to be honest, for the junior ID courses I did wanted to make sure I was pursuing to make myself a better sculptor by downloading a software app on my iPad called Nomad that would allow me to reimagine my 2D or orthographic view of my potential project sketchings into real CAD files to print. Mind you, this course was also the first ever course for my ID major that was a 3-month course that I had to handle much stricter guidelines than ever before. And because of that, I was also consumed with so much workload that it was becoming a bit overwhelming. I mean, every individual in the class was struggling to some extent because the professor was all about obstructing your process you're comfortable with. And I personally dig with that mentality. It did push my way of thinking to new ways I didn't think of before. And when exchanging ideas from each other, it felt super beautiful because everyone had switched so many times for their idea. Some of the projects in the earlier parts of the semester would change due to the open nature of the scope of the project, which I personally liked a lot. Although I didn't necessarily change much for my project, I did stick with a formal idea from start to finish. We all had to have a user who had a routine that we could analyze deeply and see 2 ways of fixing that routine. One of the ways of fixing the routine would to be fix one particular part of the routine, or have the entire routine be entirely changed and have the person be able to formally accept the change without having too much of a struggle accepting the change. I know I said a lot of words, it sounds a lot right now, but it would make sense. I couldn't make too many time lapses on that because everything in the early half of the fall semester was super research heavy to make sure we knew exactly what and who we are solving it for. For me, finding that person was easy. Was personally easy to find because I chose the route that wasn't too hard to find. My sophomore roommate was the easiest pick because I'm sure I was able to dissect their routine to my advantage to fix some aspect of their routine. I knew from the get-go I didn't want to redesign their entire workflow. That would be extremely difficult for me. I wanted to take advantage of this course into the 3D printing and tolerance aspect of model making in the class. And I didn't think I needed to focus so much on the sketching and preliminary researching aspect too much. It's something I got super incentive to do already anyway. The research portion is just something that gives us the incentive to continue figuring out the solution that will hopefully stick for the audience or person's particular problem. So now you know the way I was covering my junior course. Now back to the majority of it being the ceramic course. I was struggling with that course in terms of balance because my professor low-key got scared of me of how I would be able to balance the social life and dedication of being really good in this course. But looking back at it, I needed that extra push into this course because that mentality sets me up for success for the rest of my endeavors for the courses I must take into my minor courses. Plus, the level of dedication and patience tolerance had matured by a significant amount after passing this course. I became super endeared into the level of commitment and time put into the course. I definitely grew as a person because of this. Unironically, I became much more social because I would ask during after hours when class would end to keep me at bay of what I need to improve in. And I appreciate that from them. I still occasionally talk to them every now and then. I became super attentive during class more than ever. Asked for 1 or 2 times or a repeat of the demo we had and would implement them into my own study of the material and repetition of it in the extra hours. But nonetheless, my professor told me he respected my tenacity for the course and he would see me making time for the course anytime I could. But he said it's not matching the level of progress, so I had to quickly change my methodology of something. I still don't know what clicked in my head about how I fucking locked in later half of the class and still managed to somewhat give a good level of output of my class. I even second guessed whether or not I deserved the title of being the enthusiast for 3D model making 2D sketches into reality. At the end of it, I regained my confidence again and now self-doubt and no longer self-doubt anymore, because eventually I would be on the same level as my classmates or better if I put more dedications towards my dream. Also, on top of that, with my roommates, I will say while I was working on my projects as the finals were approaching in November, I was starting to see a lot of the other sides I didn't see before in our friendship. So I was learning more about who they were, how they would act under pressure for when academics would get in the way of things for their personal projects or jobs or whatever that came. that, keeps them preoccupied. And the dishes will pile up like crazy. And I would still do it because I know I wouldn't want to come home to dishes not being done. I get when and then after that, I kind of got, what my father was talking about. He hated how there would be dishes that would be left undone the whole day. And he would come home from a long day of work and just have the right to complain about it, honestly. So he will have the right to complain about it. And so I grew up understanding, due to the fact that I would come home to plates being not cleaned. So I understand my father a bit now. And when, I want to come home knowing that the plates are done and I'm ready to cook with no problem with any dishes being fucking dirty. But guess what? I did the dishes anyway. I was just super tired of being a servant at the time. I do it because I guarantee that it wouldn't be done at all. And that would severely piss me off. Because you mean to tell me that the plates would be unwashed for the next entire week? In my mind, I'm like, I should voice it, but it's going to be a struggle because the action would be the same. I just felt like the responsibility we spoke about would go down to the drain afterwards. And I called it respectfully. It was true. It is what it is. As this was being handled to a degree, I would work on getting better multitasking in different classes by mid-November. I had gotten better with my throwing and centering the clay, and now it was, the junior ID courses I'm talking about. I had to make sure it didn't beat my ass. It was a lot of making sure that the process book wasn't getting quite frankly, put aside. Like I've mentioned before, working on the laptop on an Illustrator file can be very mundane and relaxing, but it's super dependent on the task you're performing. I was so tired from the ceramic classes that in my downtime I would just relax or sleep from the amount of the amount of work my forearms go through. I was super tired because that class had already begun the final project, which was my kitchen set that could be used. Plus, it had to have some sort of design language involved, whether that be through the color or material or finish. And I was super excited for it because by that point, my understanding of the material had gotten so much better after the personal conversation I'd had with my professor. I still followed up my professor's endeavors to this day through Instagram. He was a grad student at the same time, so I only had him for his last year in his degree, but it made my class a memorable experience. He taught me how to have patience going into any materials I foresee myself trying out next semester. After working long hours and all-nighters in that class, I was basically ahead of the game. And I was super happy to have it turn out to be what it was. The kitchen set was called the Love Handles. It's called the Love Handles because every cup and bowl had some form of resemblance to that figure waist where the love handles are sticking out. Plus, the color was a mixture of two glazes that created a cow-spotted design to it that really made it stand out well in daytime, but also look like a really well-blended nightlife for dinner or coffee. With the junior studio class, I've gotten the stuff down into the process book, but it was something that I've had a hard time trying not to fall behind with. But nonetheless, I got through it and made it to the final stretch. What was nice about it was that we didn't have to do the formal critique style at all. The professor was super nice in that regard. He was super critical with everyone's ideas, and I was super happy he was with me as well. He pushed everyone to be uncomfortable with what you already are capable of doing. If you use this curriculum to advance your CAD modeling making skills, go for that. It will show in your work. If you're looking for a whole refresh for your way of thinking and design strategy, then that's the way to go. If you didn't take anything new out of this course, I would say you didn't learn anything at all. It would have been impossible, however, due to how stern he was with the deadlines. I mean, he was treating us like senior designers at a company. And do I blame him at all for that? No. Because that will be something that we have to deal with constantly, being pushed by the manager or supervisor who wants the team of designers to push their creative methods of practice to new ways of thinking and methodology. So for the most part, yeah, I got to push myself to see how far I can get with my goals I had set for this class in the beginning. I wanted to make sure my modeling in CAD was not lost just because I took one course in sophomore spring semester and forgot about it over time. I wanted to also get better at the 3D printing process and learn more of what that has to offer overall, which it offered so many prototyping advantages. The only thing I don't like about 3D printing is the print time I would have to consider and the money wall it has for someone myself currently with spending power to leverage my skills again for that at the moment. That's why I still heavily prioritize working with my hands. You see, it's an instant feedback response that you will feel from working on that material. And according to that, you will readjust from those said responses. From there, I would continue onward with spring semester junior year. I knew I wanted to work on clay still, so I applied for the clay modeling making class that the primary focus would be to make a car from your sketches. I also had to mention I was dropped dead from my class assistant job right away due to the high competitiveness of continuing this role. And I was super sad to see that message in emails because I was going to lose my hours and pay. Mind you, I was restricted with a woodshop job because I was dealing with only a maximum of 3 hours. I would only get 2 shifts out of the week, and the same for the class assistant job as well. So then I would basically lose half of my paycheck earnings. So now I was left stranded to find another on-campus job that could be something that I'm not stressing over like I did in the deli job. To no surprise, the amount of college on-campus jobs were also super limiting as well. Not many flexible jobs with my capability wasn't really there. But I did apply for a supervisor position and got it, but also realized I really wouldn't get the best hours through the semester. It would be a kind of job that starts later in the semester from the middle to the very end of it, which is not great because I self-fund my projects, like I said before many times. And it's super sad to see that I couldn't be working a consistent job at all. So I needed to do what I need best. Come back to the deli and work for at least 2 shifts again with them, with a little less hours due to the fact that they had people already. So I took this position to the end of my last semester in college, and it was super chill because it was what I was already used to, waking up early, doing prep work, and getting behind the schedule every week. And I had no problem waking up early either, so it was manageable. Other than that, I was still making nowhere near the level amount of money that I was desiring for. So I had to make sure that I managed my money well and not spend too much. While that was taking place, I was taking a kinetic glass class that was all about using the torch and getting behind new materials I wasn't used to. I will say it was nice not having to clean my clothes every night. I will admit that. The new problem now I was facing was part of the glass was hot and it kept making myself from being burned. And man, that was a struggle in the first couple of weeks. Plus, it was interesting going from a very strict professor to a professor that was pretty lenient with what you produce from the course assignments. It was nice that he had a technical assignments along with it because I was able to work with everything in a manner where I would still have to dedicate a good portion of my after-class schedule to get results that I find desirable to my satisfaction. I didn't need to go after classes for that. I just instead used my Friday mornings to wake up early and get things done for at least 2 hours in the morning and head over to my monitor shift. Which wasn't all that bad because over time it was definitely adding up on my time-lapse journal entries, which was stacking up real fast. And that was pretty nice to see by the end of the semester. While that was happening, I was spending a good chunk of my paycheck dumping into the car automotive class. It was expensive, but thank God it wasn't as expensive with the 3D printing stuff I was doing the previous semester. I was spending a lot of money on the specs and the different electrical components, which was a lot to deal with. This end of semester spend was at least $150 for the entire project, which wasn't bad at all. Compared to the last semester, it was at least $350 to $400 range, which is significantly much better to deal with now. After sketching some ideas, it was straight into making the first half of the car. We had to have it done before spring break started, and I was making sure I was on track with that, considering how long it can take to get considerably far with clay. I know now especially how the work was in the last semester with clay, and that it was super tasking if you leave a lot of the work for it at the last minute as the deadline approaches. But nonetheless, I kept going, and the part that took the longest was the second half of the clay, and that was a pain. Mind you, after all of that, during class, we would have in-class lectures of how patents work and how to do all of that and all. Which was great and all, but super long for no apparent reason. I really wanted to use my class time to work on my car model instead. I did that anyway after glass class, which ended at 5 p.m., because I would have the automotive class from 11 to 2, and then right after that, just get straight into the glass class. And then after that, I would go back to make up the time to do the automotive class that I should have done in 11 to 2. So I was working long hours after my day would end. After all of that, however, I was dealing with roommate problems, and I did notice how much of the fig farm was a bit of a big divide in terms of people's friend groups and all. Which is okay with me, because I know for such a big friend group like that, it will be inevitable to be able to hang out with everyone and find the right time to hang out. Plus, with my schedule as a junior at the time, while everyone else is a sophomore, is different, as I'm tackling so much more, although by choice, I wanted to be kept busy doing things. That's just me. I'm a very busy person. For me, that felt nice just because on my off time, I just chill, play games, hang out every now and then. But when it comes to hanging out with my girlfriend, with other people, it would be a struggle just because I would try to ask to reschedule or rework it so when she visits over here, we can all go. The roommate next to me would feel left out due to feeling like not being asked along with everyone else to go out with him, and that would be pretty annoying for him, which is valid to ask why, he wouldn't be approached or thought of. It's valid for him to feel this way. And I will admit that was struggling for some reason to ask him to see his availability and all. In a later note, you will know that I was struggling to come to terms if a friend/roommate would be having a judgmental grudge with my girlfriend and for my decisions and all. But back to now. I was thinking, in order to not struggle finding time, I might as well stop acting like the middleman and have my girlfriend enter the forbidden channel of the UC Neighbors Fig Farm channel within the Discord server. I've added her, and it would be easy. It was going to be easy for me. I would have one less communication problem to have to communicate everything passing over me every time. I was getting pretty annoyed by it. It became tiring having to manage so many things at once, let alone my own busy schedule, so I just sat through and made sure that I was able to get things going. After a couple of days, I was doing pretty well. Even my roommates agreed with it. It would eliminate me having to communicate everything that's going within UC, but there comes an issue for one person. They've had personal roommate beefs between my girlfriend and her. They had struggled to meet eye to eye, much or less, not my topic to discuss. It gets super lengthy. all I can say is that I was in my girlfriend's favor just because I chose what I thought was right at the time, when there were freshmen and I was a sophomore. Their RA wasn't really doing much to solve anything that they had problems with and all, so I was just getting the ball rolling for them to decide on a common ground by, making sure that they knew what they needed to get out of that. And I've tried my best, but clearly when the person who was in charge of the entire Fake Fun Discord and I was super tired at that fact that I was defending on my girlfriend's behalf, in the sense that the squabble between them wasn't really settled. I was able to tell because my girlfriend got kicked off of the channel, and I was pretty pissed off. I knew I was in the wrong for simply lashing out the way I did to her kicking my girlfriend out. I was super pissed off at that fact, and I didn't like that I knew that it would be going to be a back and forth, because I was like, well, I put on my mask of putting up with all the bullshit and direct and bluntness, no filter she had. So she would say shit that would simply not fly if she had said that to some other stranger who would have hurt her. But I said to myself, well, she's a friend of mine, so I will let it fly. But at the same time, you wouldn't be saying things like that at all. Friends tell the truth in a way that will not seem so disrespectful at all. And there's ways to do that, but it wasn't apparent for her at all in terms of knowing how to say the truth without disrespecting the other person. So in turn, this has caused my roommate next to me to become super pissed off in terms of how I handle it. And I knew that he and his girlfriend chose a side, which is fine, but was definitely the final straw for us. Because for me, when he had his moment wondering if he had any friends that still considered him his friend at all, he thought I was someone who would consider him and all. But at the same time, I was super annoyed at the fact that he believed there was something that was flawed about myself, which was getting me wondering a lot of what he saw was flaws. He mentions that I was like a mirror who replies back questions and mirrors other people, but that wouldn't be true because I genuinely like asking questions. Ever since I was a kid, for the longest time, I was always curious about other people, and that in turn makes me feel happy. And now I always had my personal hobbies and all. So I still don't know where he was coming from, but I tried to understand where he was standing and how that mirror analogy was affecting how he viewed our friendship. But, I still couldn't understand his point of view. So I had to reassure him that it wasn't something he should look into too much, because it's not a mirror to look at me as that's a part of me. Not something that should in turn be seen as something else. So I was thinking that he was analyzing it too much, because that was simply not true to how I view myself at all. So, I said to him that, if it was anything he could fix his side of how he is in a friendship, I said fixing how not to be super blunt, because I could also be super mean, because you can also be super mean even if you're not trying to, He told me, can you call me out when I do that? And I said yes to it, but in a way, in my head, I was hoping that he would get used to trying to handle that portion on his own. Just because when you tell someone they're doing things that makes them feel a certain way, they would try to be self-accountable to some extent, but that wasn't apparent at all. And I was getting super annoyed that it didn't change at all. So when that happened in the Discord channel of my girlfriend getting kicked out, he told me directly that what I did was not cool at all. Just because she's going through so much and I was struggling with, you yourself, and I didn't tell him all that much, because every time you talk with him, you feel like you're being walked on and belittled. And we were in an emotional, moment at that night, and he was blabbing about the past and making connections that makes no sense whatsoever. And this was becoming the beginning of the end. So, mind you, after spring break at this point, we're basically not talking as much and when it happened. So, I was just simply avoiding his ass for a while, and I was doing so by being with my girlfriend and my friends. Also, at this occurrence, while it was happening, another small problem I was having was that I had a friend and she was being grouped up with me as if we were boyfriend and girlfriend, and that was simply not true at all. She's in my major, mind you, so the constant amount of time I would be doing my car model, people would just, people would assume that when she would come over to visit and see what I'm doing and just, talk while I'm doing my car in time lapse. And, I thought, I really liked that. And, it was awesome. So it caused, we would talk and then bloom and then, and then boom. And then I would still feel very productive and get to talk with my friends for a little while before we locked in into our work. Sometimes she would come after 5 p.m. as well to work alongside with me and do her Chinese or finance homework. I kind of forgot by now, but it would be something like that. And it started one by one from some of my colleagues in my class. And it started by one from some of my colleagues in my class, and towards the closure of the spring semester, people and even some of Fig Farm's peeps thought I was, cheating with her. And me and her felt annoyed by this assumption, so me and her simply just stopped talking because, dude, we didn't like the allegations being made about us. We were just friends. What did help was that she started crushing on one of her colleagues at working in CAD Tech, and that helped a lot because that meant later on they would be going on a date and becoming boyfriend and girlfriend, which was nice for her. And she would always tell me about her past ex and say that she would have a hard time loving again, especially in college, being that some people do just want to fucking call it at that. She wants something, that had meaning and genuine love, and I was happy. So that meant less hanging out because we're both busy and got our own loving partners to hang out. Every now and then we hung out and talked with my girlfriend and even my brother when he would come to visit Rochester. But to remain back to the spring semester timeline, I remember it was closing into the final submission and everyone was going through it, man. I mean, my roommates, friends were definitely feeling it because it was starting to become a lot busier than their freshman spring semester from last year. And I was also be taking my writing comic graphic novel course as well. I totally forgot to talk about that as well, but that's also would take a lot of time in terms of going through from going to doing a lot of hand modeling work to just writing and finding evidence and all. Mind you, for my final, I proposed to do a video essay for class. It was a professor that, really hammered my writing and everything to like my grammar, and it was annoying as hell, but I got through it because I was writing the script for the 20-minute video essay. Just super easy. Just asking because, I had to write the script first, so that sounds good, and when it's time for me to speak to it in my mic. And this part is important because I was living the lifestyle of going to work and class and staying at booth till 11 p.m. and coming back to write some more in my script. This played into hand with how I wasn't really hanging out with my roommates out in the living room with the free time I had. And also it had to do with the fact that at this point I was really avoiding my roommates next to me a lot. So that played into the factor a lot. So when my roommate who drives the car one day decided to help my roommates next door to me to go to Lowe's and all, and they would, discuss things about me, which weren't really anything bad. It was mainly for the roommate to catch up to speed with what's been happening with me and all. Mind you, this all happened because the roommate next door to me would start walking in a fine line of just basically disrespecting me and making assumptions about me hanging out with another friend of mine a lot. The one I was talking about earlier that the people were thinking we were in a relationship at one point. He believed that if I was cheating, it would be with her due to the fact that I was hanging out with her a lot. And plus, that made my roommates, who drives, super concerned for me and a bit mad. So he wanted to make sure that it wasn't true. So when they head back to, UC, to the apartment, I was still chilling in my room, finding time to relax. I did have a beatbox that late afternoon just to ease out the stress and all. And I believe it was a Sunday or a Saturday or something like that. But he texted me to talk to him if I had a minute, and I saw this message and I was super concerned about it. So I was like, sure, let's talk outside in the living room. But I was one beatbox in, so I was still coherent enough to talk and understand what he was saying. So he talked to me about how I felt, with my girlfriend and all, and I was getting super pissed off in the inside because this meant that my roommate was talking about, minor things he would hear of my conversations during my calls with my girlfriend, he misinterpreted into a bigger problem in the relationship and how I wasn't happy at all. My roommate that drives has mentioned if it's because of that, I would talk more regularly and hang out with my friends, and thought I would be cheating with my girlfriend. And I easily declined this, his thoughts and worries, because that simply wasn't true. And I would constantly reassure him that I love my girlfriend a lot. And mind you, he's also friends with her, so he would know how my bond is with her. And because of that, I was super thankful that he apologized for pressing on me about this alleged assumptions he heard during his trip. And I told him I was getting pissed off at the fact that he would even say that at that point I was going to lose my shit. So I was becoming a sponge of sorts. You have a problem that you have, I would take it in and then move on. But if another person who has a problem with you has a problem of sorts, I would also soak it in. But I was getting pretty tired out of that because of this. So, I was getting annoyed with that as well. So at the end of the week, I was so over it. During a call with my girlfriend, I was a bit tipsy, and I was like, fuck, man, I can't deal with this anymore, I just went out, out of the apartment. Because at this point, I couldn't be in UC anymore due to how, because at this point, my roommate at that point couldn't be in UC anymore due to how expensive it was getting with his tuition if he started to, stay there for long term. And it also has to do with the fact that he could move in with his girlfriend. Because for almost 2 semesters at this point, she would just stay over at UC, and I was like, oh, okay, sure, it doesn't bother me. I was wishing I was told in advance, and then I just uttered the words of, I want to kill myself. And I realized that, I was so over it, that I told my girlfriend I want alone time, and I did just that. I went so down bad, I head over with my sandals in a cold night at 11 p.m.ish, like 11 p.m.-ish, and said, fuck it, let's do a long walk from UC to the furthest 7-Eleven, and I did just that. At this point, I was at a breaking point. I was screaming out loud in pain, and it was getting super concerning. I walked for another hour, and by that point, my girlfriend called me just to make sure I was safe. And she was super worried for me, thinking I would get myself killed or something like that. So I stayed in the conversation the entire way through, and when I got to 7-Eleven, I was slightly sobered up, but I decided to grab another beatbox, and I did just that, drinking on the way back to UC. And I was screaming more and more at that point. The public safety had to get me in their car to have to drive to UC 328, which they did, and told me that they were here to help me with any roommate situation. I got back at 2:47 a.m. at that point, and I slept like a baby, and woke up slightly late to class. But as long as I was alive, that's all that mattered, right? And I felt, no longer deprived of life, and I figured out that I don't want to ever go outside drunk, and, that's a bad idea. Someone could have taken advantage of me, or I could have died in the hands of someone outside of campus. My girlfriend checked up on me this morning with a text if I'm feeling fine and all, and I wanted to say I'm super grateful of her being in my life. And she wanted to also apologize to me about having to talk about her feelings with my roommate next door to me, making her feel like shit as well, because I was super sponged up by that point from both sides. And she told me that I should probably talk about this with him, and I said I will soon, so I have to get that stuff sorted out. And it was going to happen on Wednesday night. And I managed to muster the courage to do so. I told him in text about it and said that I wanted to discuss our friendship. And we discussed it that night, and I mentioned to him what happened that night before feeling pretty suicidal, and telling him that he played a huge role in that. And I didn't want to pursue much into our friendship anymore because of that. And I said, I just want to be acquaintances, only discussing things in class and such, as I will be seeing this person during my class hours and monitor hours. On his side of things, he would discuss how he didn't feel like I was meant to be in a relationship that I am in right now with, because I deserve even better than what I have right now. And I told him to respectfully stop butting into my relationship like I'm your puppet. I appreciate the help when I want it, but this relationship is not yours, and you're not to, butt in. I told him that I don't want, I don't watch your relationship, because a true friend wants what's best for his friend. If this relationship has made him happy, I want that. I would give advice if he wants, but that's it. I don't have opinions, nor do I have a way of acting when I'm near them, like how he would act when I'm in my relationship and she would visit UC. It's not his right to do that, so we called it. Mind you, it was at least the last 2 weeks of class by this point, and on top of that, I was going to end another friendship with another friend of mine. He was a freshman roommate, and during his semester, he was, this semester he was in Copenhagen. He was struggling to find housing for fall semester, which I find poetic that he became my next door housing neighbor in UC. And I believed he, lived in UC 329 or some shit like that. But he was saying he was getting fed up with how complacent I am, which I am not, because the last time I checked my relationship outside of college, when our semester is over in summer, we would hardly text. It was in the premises of it being in college settings and nothing else. He did help me in exchange in my freshman semester with my broken relationship with my ex. Also gave a whole, monitor. But I wanted to remind him that I couldn't really do much in return. And he and I could, he and I come from different states and also different tax brackets. So not saying he wanted money in return. He wanted something in friends who, who's loyal and all. But in terms of emotional wants, that wasn't there at all. I really don't get that, So I was really sad that he didn't want to fix it, and I was trying to explain my side, and he wasn't. He has a massive ego, and a lot of it has to do with his design world, and I could appreciate that in him, but also man, I really don't get it, I try to talk to you like a human being, and it's quite literally going nowhere. I just don't get it at all. So it was read as a person who was just emotionally selfish. I wasn't like that to him, so why do I get that from him? I really don't get it. Plus, saying that he's in debt because of me is ludicrous, because I didn't understand why a single person could make you go in debt for housing-related issues. Not my fault you haven't broadened your horizon in college. I've kept my connections wide and far. Sorry you don't have same networks of close friends, because holy shit, man. Had roommate problems that semester and all, and I was just not looking forward to seeing his ass again. I did try to save it one more time when I saw him, and I was taking the same 2 classes during my fall semester senior year. And anywho, to stay in touch with the time lapses, the results were not where I wanted, but I managed to stick with this all the way through, and it was super amazing that I managed to do that well. And I was super happy regardless that I managed to do this all with the emotional stress and strain I was feeling throughout the semester and all. And it's still, paid off, because I still said that these time lapses won't get done by themselves, So I need to get them done, and I have to stick to my dream. And I did that. And looking back now with the fact that I'm writing the script for the movie is very rewarding and nostalgic to an extent, and I'm feeling a sense of euphoria. So thanks for the hardship this semester endured. But it was going to get rough. Next semester, I was putting myself through a lot. This summer of junior year, going into the next semester, was so crazy to think about, because I was basically entering with knowing this is my last 2 semesters of college. Closing this part of my life, I was super numb, because I just realized there was not going to feel that I was not going to feel great once it's all over. What I was calling, the simulation, and everything. And I was definitely going to miss my space away from my family because I felt like I was genuinely doing great. I have my girlfriend and I have my friends, roommates, and it felt like that was the best time of my life. Obviously, I know I will be living in better circumstances. I just have to manifest it and actively fight towards living that dream I had. But moving forward into my next final chapter into college, fall semester, senior year. So it's the fall semester of senior year, and I was super numb at this point. I had a lot of things happen through the spring semester, and I was just not really processing the entire thing as well. Plus, I got a new roommate that was a sophomore, and it was super interesting to me because this one was so much more, easier to handle because of the fact that he kept his clean stuff to himself, and that, was really beautiful and all. And I really did appreciate that a lot because the complete opposite experience, because basically I had the complete opposite experience I endured through the entirety of last year. And it went at that moment I learned that not all friends are equipped to being roommates. Some are just good friends only. It was meant to be. I had to have gone through that experience to understand that experience and all. So it makes so much sense now. Plus, I also met another friend from his trip last semester in spring, and it was something to say the least. I was super intrigued that me and him took the same class and all, let alone the two of the same classes. It was not something on my radar that I was expecting and all, but after all, I was super not so interested in resolving the dispute we had over text, because he was not confrontational, very against that for some reason, and I genuinely don't understand when people are like that, especially when I've discussed things with him about this and all. I won't get into this topic again, but I just wanted to keep it light. He is super egotistical. I really can't stand that in people. And I was like, man, can you pick your poison? He clearly chooses the poison that's super about just wanting to get his ego sucked all the time. And I personally think that's super fragile. Clearly, after one move playing mind chess with the dude, it just falls apart. And I personally don't want to be friends with someone like that all the time. And that's not cool whatsoever. So going into the semester, about 3 weeks into the semester, it was super eager to see if I could get the same non-response, if I got the same non-response block off content type answer from him. And unfortunately, I got exactly that, which is to draw from your own conclusion. And I had to, which is, I had to assume that this fucker don't want to be friends at all. So I said, hell no, I will not tolerate that behavior. It's very giving up and losing energy kind of vibe to it. But anywho, in terms of my schedule for this semester, it's pretty busy in terms of being at booth a lot. Voluntarily though. Not like, because I have to. It's mainly because I saw this and next semester as my last time being in booth and a lot of the giving opportunities to create anything in the shop at all. So because of that, I needed to get used to those hours, right? If my day ended at 2 p.m., I would stay at booth till 5 p.m. But that's also because I would have a night class for my metals and jewelry introductory course. It was a great course. I did appreciate the professor quite a bit. She was pretty compliant with my similarities from my class. She's very similar to my class professor from last semester, which was nice. I just had to make sure I showed up and all. The time lapses that you see are all mainly time lapses that have to deal mostly with, this class and everything, which was nice. I just had to make sure, I did everything that was required from the class. And I really captured much of my ID courses due to the fact that one for my capstone course, it was just really research heavy in the first half of the semester. And the other ID course was a company sponsoring this course, which was cool. You get to feel like you're an actual senior designer and all. But I managed to capture some footage for that class for the prototyping iterative stage that we were in that time. But other than that, Not much, however, just because, this course afterwards in the middle part of the semester was not that physical prototyping at all, which was all because it was being 3D printed heavy, and it wasn't something I wanted to include in my time-lapse movie at all. It'd be pretty boring if you had saw that all the time. It's defeating the purpose of why I started the process back in sophomore year, and because of that, I was slightly disappointed. But nonetheless, the pressure was on, though. We did an on-site visit to the company's area of manufacturing their metals. I got to mention who we worked for, but it was for the company based in Syracuse called Gardall. They make safes, and I will say that class was super stressful due to the fact that there weren't really any safe guardrails other than course syllabus descriptions, right? Showing up and all that stuff was simply mandatory. And man, can I say it was a pain having to finish your main classes in 4th floor booth, to then having to go up to the Vignelli's archive rooms to have the presentations and the classes there. It was pretty annoying in all regards. But once after we were done with that and starting working on the prototypes for the class, we worked at booth and left the final day of class be the day where we present the ideas of 1-minute pitch describing what are safes and the products that we made to them, and they will select a handful of winners or either select one winner to present them in the booth aisle in ICFF, which is amazing just because you will be there for all 3 days of the convention and potentially connect with business people and design-oriented people from all over the world, which is really freaking cool. But I didn't get that, and I had a lot of my fellow classmates who happened to have won and all. And it's pretty awesome because we were all struggling throughout the semester, and a lot of my classmates would see me work on my capstone a lot more due to the fact that it handled more with my interest in that way than this class. I eventually did get to finish the product for photo shoot day, but what a struggle it was getting my 3D printed from the Fab Lab. Genuinely money straining when you don't have all the budget in the world for this at all. So that was pretty annoying. Most of my other friends had 3D printers of their own that they could rely on. All they had to do was buy filament and use them to work on their things. Other than that, though, it was super taxing on the sanding and getting the spray paint and all that. And mind you, I had to get a specific kind of spray paint, not any kind. It had to be a gray primer so that all the products people made when standing next to each other would synergize better and not look apart from each other. It would have been pretty bad if someone didn't grab the right gray and the judges from the company came and they looked at the products. It will stick out like a sore thumb in a way you don't want. So you want the design itself to stick out, and then the function will speak in their own way. But while doing this, mind you, I'm a bit behind during my night class sessions, and oh boy, I was not happy with the outcomes in this class either. It was only good when I was doing the ring, and that was really it. And there's have been so many times where I think I could catch myself on fire due to the either, lack of sleep or being really deprived from food by this point. And I was just going through it with it all. A lot of it once was just not fun at all, and I was super frustrated. But the footage I kept telling myself is going to be worth it in the end. Like how I kept telling myself these past 3 years, which is great that I have, it just became second nature to record things. And man, I was super excited for it because I was getting close to just having the script started soon. And because of that fact, the most of the time lapses were being outsourced from not ID, courses. So some of my friends were thinking that I stopped, which I told them no, because of the fact that I said it just wasn't any reason to showcase some of the ID courses due to having these semesters be tackling 3D prints and all that stuff, which ended up happening again with last year's fall junior year. So again, there's nothing wrong with it at all. I just made up for that by taking a lot of pictures and all that jazz. At the end of the semester, though, when it got to that point, there wasn't much to look forward to, and when I meant that, and what I mean by that, I was waiting for the inevitable job search after college was over, which I'm currently doing while working on this passion project that I've always wanted to do for some time now. And I was pretty disappointed that I didn't win. It was December break at this point, and I was doing the same thing over and over, waking up for parking and all that stuff, driving my dad to work in the morning and finding parking. But then it kind of woke up with this life event that happened, which was a car accident. No one was injured. This is when life was going to show me things that I needed to get better with, which is overconfidence, and that can get you in situations you don't want to be in at all. I was super embarrassed with myself because this was a day before having to return to college, and I was super tired and just not having a good time with it. I was super bummed out due to the fact that my parents had to deal with so much for me and making sure we had to lie out of our ass to get out of this situation. In a way, I was thankful that I was in college. That way we could leverage my college attendance as an excuse not to have to pay an abnormal amount of money, because that was something that we couldn't afford at that time. The level of guilt I felt was something that I couldn't bear much. So I didn't have much time to really process the entire thing during the first 3 weeks of the spring semester. I forgot to mention that this semester didn't have much going on for my glass blowing class because I couldn't find any way possible to safely record my iPad in the room. So you'll most likely just be seeing a lot of wood relating class material stuff. And even in that class, I had to stop halfway right before announcing the final for that class, which was super bummed out because nonetheless, I was able to get a good amount of content from the time frame to extend. Also just telling how I felt, for the semester. But anyways, there's this thing I didn't feel like addressing at all that much because I was super not into that 1 week design sprint that we did, which is called T-. It was not it. But the fact that this last T- I would ever do is in partnership with home care products. Your everyday and your big supermarkets is super fun, but it was also extremely challenging in the fact that it was something that I'm not a big fan of. The level of competition being pit against other teams was definitely showing a lot, and I was seeing how people were viewing this as a job opportunity after graduating and all. And after waking up early in the morning, was meant for nothing at the end, because I too was hoping that I could get a return offer from winning in the team, and I was super not having that. But nonetheless, I was making sure that I was trying to get my best going forward, being optimistic, and that still didn't get me anywhere. But then I just completely crashed afterwards when the event ended, because I was very annoyed, and I said, fuck it, let me grab a drink and just chill out for the night, and it was all over. And my teammate put just the same amount of time and effort as I did, and we all felt it. It did shift how we all perceived each other in terms of, seniors who have especially taken the meta project right after that also. So, right before this also. So that could definitely affect our egos and self-esteems when it came to designing. And that was something that I was not super happy with in my mind. Which I need to remind you guys, I can keep a good front for a while until it all just hits me later into the semester. Mind you, this semester, I had no writing classes anymore, just doing 4 studios and getting things out of the way. Also, I did take a lighting studio course, which was cool, but not really fun in my favor at all. I felt like I knew I was putting enough effort as I wanted to, but man, the sketches were amazing, and I did appreciate the level of quality my sketches were, and of course, they need improvements, obviously. But I will give myself credit where it's due, While on top of that, I was working on my capstone, and I needed to sort out so much research to finalize in terms of my CMF library. And I needed to sort out so much research and make sure, that it wasn't too limiting, and also enough to just justify my capstone prerogatives. First thing first, answering what I need to do, which is making a suitcase display be something that could be TSA approved, which would, of course, need to be the fact that the material needed to be to be just made in the same way like any fancy or cheap carry-on luggage is made out of. And I learned that the material is widely used as well. The material is called ABS plastic. and the material has a super high shock absorption, and that widely used form of manufacturing is vacuum forming, which means that a suitcase comes with 2 modes readily available to be repeated with the same details, draft angles, and everything for easy drying when removing the material itself. And that itself is really cool because I felt like I was going into territories of things I was not really familiar with, which was learning how to use a CNC machine and getting into how the functionality works through Fusion and how it will get made in real life. I no longer have the materials to be made at home because I donated to my favorite professor, Juan O'Hara, who I took for my CAD class back in sophomore year. And I'm forever eternally grateful for having him as a mentor who is Latino as himself, and that felt really nice to be connected by that, and also our love and criticism for Apple products. But other than that, I was getting right into the crevices of learning that while taking all the other studio courses, where my hands were just constantly learning new things while also having to adapt to different material practices like wood to glass. And then to just relax while working on my CNC files in Fusion, which was giving my hands some acute trauma from doing all of that every day in the early half of the semester before spring break, and that came over. Which was crazy how it all happened. I was super tired by this point, and it was stressful because I had one assignment for my glass class that had been craved over for the last, later half of the semester after spring break. I was super behind, and then not to mention, I was struggling with making the fucking mallet during my wood hand tool making class, which was super debilitating due to how much patience that is required and necessary to have when handling with wood. And of course, I challenged myself with a really dense piece of wood that is known to have a lot of fuzz when removing material. So I was feeling like I was going millions of miles ahead with my capstone while not really balancing everything else, causing almost a snowball effect. Also, crazy snowstorms occurred in the early of the spring semester and had snow out for like a good month before April hit with some nice weather. But yeah, it's just super frustrating. But then when I was getting to a good stopping point with my capstone, with designing my CNC ready file and design in Fusion, I was like, okay, I'm ready to send this over to Fab Lab and get the design top done. And this was right after getting the top casing part down packed. So because after getting that done, the second half of the mold would be super easy to make. But as per usual, you would have to make your stock material that you get cut off, that you're gonna get cut off. And I chose a material that was easy to cut off and one that is cheap, but also not going to fall apart for the amount of times I was going to repeat the process of the vacuum former in the shed makerspace. And mind you, I did hinge the fact that I was gonna have to get the material from my boss, Fabiano, and I'm so internally grateful for that as well, that he has presented with me because, he was making sure I was getting the ABS material that I needed to be successful. And it wasn't cheap either. It was super expensive for the amount that I needed. So I got 6 of them, and I was just super annoyed by the amount that they costed for. But, it is what it is. I was going to get results. I first started with cheap polystyrene plastic just to see if the draft angles from both the male and female material will get the details that are needed with the necessary holes needed to help capture the details of the material, which is fine for now. I needed to show this before the last time we were going to get constructive criticism before finalizing everything for the capstone show in April. So mind you, this is the only course I have in the back of my mind that is stressing me out a lot due to the fact that I was going to have to make everything look like I was, like everything looked like the sketch I had created, and that I had thought enough time to work in the internal part of the suitcase, but nope, I didn't, and underestimated the amount of time it was going to take to get that out of the way. But it's all well and learned for the next time if I were to redesign and add necessary changes. Also, I wanted to say by this point, I made it with my past friends from my freshman year, that one, that had my girlfriend had problems with before, and we were good now. It was super interesting because for a long time I was just on cruise control before making up the friendship again. But then after making up our past and getting over it, we would just resume like nothing changed, which was great. I will say that her mannerism and the way she acts now is a lot more mature, and I wasn't expecting that at all. But afterwards, I became glad that became the case in terms of all the personal things, life things that were happening in the background. I will say I've ended college in a satisfactory way that I can appreciate. And yes, although there are things I wish I could have done, who said I couldn't do them again or try something new after college? Obviously it requires money, but I'm working on that and making sure I can visit these places I've always wanted to go. I want to go to China, Japan, Italy, and almost all of the tourist areas, but it is so that I could at least said that I've been there before and just have that experience. But this closes the chapter and beginning anew. With that, I want to say thank you for watching this movie. It means the world to me. And as long, and as for the next long or short project I'm doing, you'll find out, and I'll keep the world posted. And as always, I will catch you guys on the flip side.